Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Some interesting Browns news has broke over the last few days. Some of this is rumor, some of this is true, some of this is speculation. Let's start with what we know for a fact has gone down, which is Juan Thornhill is no longer a Cleveland Brown. The Browns released him, saving about $3.5 million immediately on the salary cap. This was one of those moves where I could see it going either way. You could justify keeping Juan on the roster for this season because he did play serviceable at the safety position. I don't think he ever lived up to expectations of him at that position, right? I think a lot of people had hopes of Juan Thornhill coming in and being a playmaker, but he certainly was better than John Johnson, right? Like John Johnson got a real bad rap here, but it was because he was playing terrible, right? At least in the run defense element, Juan Thornhill did live up to expectations. He just wasn't ever a playmaker in the Browns coverage situations, which was ultimately what the Browns wanted out of him, right? So what is the replacement for Juan Thornhill? Is the replacement on the roster? I don't know if the article said it, but this almost certainly feels like it's going to be designated a post-June 1st cut because they're talking about saving $3.4 million against the cap. The only way you do that is if you cut him post-June 1st, so I expect this to be later announced as a post-June 1st cut. Immediately, that brings the Browns only $20 million over the salary cap. We know the restructure for Deshaun Watson will hit sooner than later, which will be a further reduction of the cap. Just those two moves alone bring the Browns up to about $15.19 million. So that is good news there. You would obviously do some more restructuring, right? You would probably restructure Denzel Ward's deal. You would probably restructure Jack Conklin. We haven't heard anything about that move yet. Circling back to the post-June 1st cut part of this, if that is true, if Juan is in fact a post-June 1st cut, that means the Browns only have one more player that they can designate a post-June 1st cut. So Jack Conklin is a name that's been speculated to be a post-June 1st cut. Ethan Posick is a name that I think makes a little bit more sense for the Browns to cut post-June 1st. Both would save a good amount of money here. You would save $6 million if you cut Ethan Posick. The idea would be that you replace him. Jack Conklin, you can restructure him, save $9 million this year, or you can post-June 1st cut him and save $14 million this year, which would be the bigger number. The question is, hey, do you think Jack Conklin is still useful for you for what you want to do as a player? And I think the answer is yes there, and the answer is no for Ethan Posick. So I think that's why he's more likely to be post-June 1st cut. It is interesting that they did do this with Juan. That's going to be about $2 million in this year's dead cap, considering that trading Myles Garrett is supposedly still something that could happen this offseason. Adding more dead cap to the salary cap indicates that the Browns are dead set not doing anything, not trading Myles Garrett. We'll see what goes on with that. And there's actually an update about the Myles Garrett situation I want to talk about a little bit later in this video. But yeah, if the Browns do that, just some simple restructures of Jack Conklin and then Joe Bitonio, let's just assume he restructures if he comes back, you're already sitting pretty easily here at $46 million of cap space. You can restructure Wyatt Teller, save some more money here. And I think Dalvin is another one you can restructure if you want to, where you could save some money there. I wonder what the post-June 1st cut for Dalvin is. You could post-June 1st cut Dalvin too, which would save you about $6 million in cap space as well. But you would have to probably keep Ethan Posick. So it really depends on their evaluation of the offensive line. Do they think Ethan Posick was a victim of the offense changing and he can have a better year? Or are they just done with Ethan Posick entirely, want to move on? That's going to determine who gets that other post-June 1st cut because the Browns have more than two candidates for that post-June 1st cut. But all of that right there, I mean, if they're able to work something out with Myles and work a new contract out, that's going to reduce a bunch of cap space, open up a bunch of cap space immediately too. So they have a lot of options here as far as cap space goes. Moving on from Juan Thornhill, not one that I thought was obviously going to happen, but one that was on the table. They decide to move on from him. The replacement, is it on the roster? Maybe it's Ronnie Hickman. I doubt it's Ronnie Hickman. Ronnie, in my evaluation of him, he is a good backup safety because what Ronnie does is keep stuff in front of him, right? What Ronnie does not do well is play with instincts, right? Like if he sees something, he doesn't really go after it. He's going to let shit happen underneath, which ends up being a problem the longer he's out there, right? If he just has to be out there for a game or a couple of games or maybe a stint in a quarter, it's not a problem. But the longer Ronnie has to be out there as a free safety, I think there's a problem there. I think Ronnie makes more sense when you have to force him to be a little bit more instinctual. So that means doing a little bit of what Ronnie McLeod did. I think that's a better fit for him. Grant Delpit, I feel like it would be a waste to put him at free safety. I think they probably try to replace Juan Thornhill in the draft or maybe free agency. Maybe they get creative and say, hey, we got Greg Newsome here. If nobody wants to trade for him because he's going to take up about $13 million in cap space, maybe we could turn Greg into a free safety. But he's had so many position changes throughout his career that I feel like that would be unfair to ask him that and expect him to be at starting level at that. But there's a lot they can do there. I'm interested to see what they try to do with that free safety position. Next bit of news, we talked about it with Matt Stafford. Feels like Matt Stafford is available this offseason. Another quarterback might have just signaled that he's available in Geno Smith. He put up this tweet of the cryptic variety, right, of LeBron James walking out of a press conference in his little tuxedo suit, short pants, whatever it was. And maybe this signifies that he's having a bit of a contract dispute with the Seattle Seahawks right now. And it would make sense, right? He's under a pretty cheap, non-guaranteed deal with the Seahawks. It would make sense for him to want to re-up and get some more money. It would make sense for the Seahawks to not want to commit to him, right? Because he's older. So there is that friction there. We will see what happens with Seattle, but that's another situation to monitor. I thought it was done for because after they hired Clint Kubiak, it seemed like they were all in on Geno Smith, right? The way that Clint was talking about him, it seemed like they were all in on Geno, so they would probably work out a new deal. But this points to there being some bumps in the road here. Maybe they get smoothed out sooner than later, but something not going quite right in that Geno Smith negotiation for the Seattle Seahawks, which could be an opportunity for the Cleveland Browns. Now, again, if you bring in Geno Smith, you're likely going to have to bring him in on a new deal. So whatever his cap numbers are right now, probably going to rise a little bit if you bring him in. Going to have to pay him some money, right? He's probably going to want $45 million a year. You can hide that on the cap for a couple of years, but eventually it's going to come due. So that's going to be something to think about with Geno. If you watch my videos, Geno Smith, Matt Stafford, those are two legitimate NFL quality starting level, above average starting level quarterbacks that you can go get if they are available. It depends on what the price is going to be for both of those guys, right? I don't want to give up 2. I don't want to give up 33. I'm not really open to doing a pick swap for 2 to 26. I think that's just as much as trading 2. So I want to retain pick 2 and retain 33. If I can get a quarterback with the rest of the picks there, I think that is a massive win. If you have to give up 33, he's really got to play well, and the team's got to be really good in order for it to be worth it, in my opinion. But Geno Smith seems like another option that could be available. I thought the chance to get him was done, but it seems like there might be another opportunity opening up for Geno. All right, let's talk about Myles Garrett, because there is a positive update here for the Myles Garrett situation. Now, I want to preference this conversation. Now, let's talk about Myles Garrett in this situation, and let's have a conversation about if this Myles Garrett holdout is more about money than what we originally thought, because there is a thought out there that could be the case. What if this is more about money than we originally thought, right? Everything that Myles has said has indicated that it's not about money. But what if this was? What if this was about getting a lot of guaranteed money, getting a lot of long-term money, right? How much easier would this be to resolve for the Cleveland Browns if that's the case? Me personally, if that were the situation, I would be excited about that, because if it's just money, that can be easily resolved. The Cleveland Browns got money. We can give him money. We can give him guaranteed money. We can do it. And then look, guaranteed money for Myles Garrett. I know people are going to act like it's the same thing as guaranteed money for Deshaun Watson, but it's not. Guaranteed money for Myles Garrett is not a big deal at all. Honestly, it just gives the team more security, because you can't really trade a player with a bunch of guarantees left on their contract. We see it right now in the bad direction of Deshaun Watson. Now, if you want to make the argument that Myles Garrett is going to suck for the rest of his contract because you give him guaranteed money, I take the bet that Myles is going to be good, right? Like, I think most people would take the bet that Myles is going to be good for the money if you give him guaranteed money up front. But if that's the case, and if the Browns are willing to offer Myles a good amount of guaranteed money, and that resolves the situation, how does that change your outlook on the Cleveland Browns' future? Because if that were to be the case, it would be something that would make me feel so much better about where the Cleveland Browns sit, knowing that this Myles thing and extension is possible. Because for the last couple of weeks, I've been operating with the feeling that it's not possible. I feel a little bit better about the chances of an extension, given that the Browns made a lot of moves today, right? They were active on the wire pretty much all day today, which indicates that they're doing something for something. Now, I'm not saying that all these moves are directly related to Myles Garrett. Have no idea what's going on. I do feel a lot better about the chances of an extension happening between these two parties, because it might be possible that Myles wanted money more than he might have let on. I think there's some things to be skeptical about if that's the case, right? One, if this thing were about money, why go about it the way that Myles did? I think that's a huge question that anybody who offers up a theory that this isn't about money has to answer. And I don't think there's a great answer for that right now, to be honest with you, right? Why did he go about it the way he went about it if all he wanted was some bread? Because that is a much simpler negotiation to have in public than I want to win now. I want to get traded to a contender. Now, if they got to a point to where the Browns weren't willing to up the offer and Myles said, hey, for this money, I'm willing to get traded to a contender, then, it starts to make more sense, right? If that is the situation. Not saying that it is, but just saying, if that is the situation, that would make more sense. And it would make more sense why Myles has been going about it with seemingly no real red button to push to get his way. If you're assuming his way is to get to a contending team, this has also been a confusing path and plan to rectify. So maybe it was a miscalculation of how requesting a trade to win now would be publicly received, and how the Radio Row thing would be publicly received. And ultimately, this was about getting a contract. And it makes sense that he went about this with no red button, because the red button was, hey, I want a deal. And the Browns were always going to be willing to offer a deal to take trading Myles Garrett off the market. So maybe this is what Myles wants. If that's the case, you should hear something sooner than later. If that's the case, then keep your eyes on that March 16th roster bonus date. If you have heard no update by March 16th that roster bonus has changed, then that means that they're probably working on something. And if we get to an announced extension before that, obviously, then there's an extension there. But a couple of things to look into. All I can really tell you is that I feel a lot better about the Browns' chances to be able to work out an extension versus how I felt last week. Now, who knows how this goes going forward? Things can fall through. All I can really say is that if that were the situation, if this weren't as much about winning or going to a contender, which again, I've had my concerns, not concerns, but my skepticism about this trade scenario being about him wanting to win right now, because nothing about how he's gone about it makes it easier for him to get moved to a contender. So, it didn't really make sense from what he was throwing out there. And there are some things about, this being about an extension, a bigger contract, that makes it hard to believe that he went about it this way. It's hard to put a finger on what exactly Myles's motivation is. And I just want to ask that question. What if Myles's motivation is more about money? Does that change how you feel about this whole thing? If the Browns are able to work out an extension with Myles Garrett, how much better do you feel about the upcoming season than you did a week or two before? That's going to be my question of the day in the comments. Before I get to the end of the video, though, there was some breaking news that dropped while editing this video, so let's get to it. More news breaking at the end of this video. Charlie Hewitt, longtime long snapper at the Cleveland Browns, what they said, 150 games. He was with the team since 2014. No longer with the team anymore. The Browns have released him. This makes sense, unfortunately. Charlie Hewitt missed, I think, a good amount of games last year. It seemed like his career was running up to the end. The Browns brought in a new long snapper. We didn't have snap problems. So makes sense there because they had two long snappers on the roster for most of the season. Makes sense to condense, get one long snapper. So Charlie Hewitt, longtime Cleveland Brown, Brown special teams legend, I guess you could say. No longer with the team going forward. The Browns have released him, and now they're going to move forward with their new long snapper. Let me see if I can remember the homie's name. Is it not Charlie Hewitt? I believe. So what? Rex Sunahar is going to be the new snapper for the Cleveland Browns. Cutting Charlie Hewitt, by the way, it saves about $1 million in cap space, if you were wondering what that is. So the Browns have been pretty active here on the waiver wire, which this is why I'm conflicted about what I've heard, because it's interesting that it's interesting I hear certain information on a day where there's so much activity on the wire for the Cleveland Browns, which tells me they're in that office, they're working, they're doing stuff, they're making moves. Now, what are these moves for? I don't know, right? Might just be regular house cleaning in February. Might be a signal that something bigger might be on its way to happening. We'll see. We'll see. Nothing big enough that has indicated to me that the Myles extension is obviously happening. Has happened yet. So I'm not at red alert for it dropping. But I will say keep an eye on that possibly happening as we get closer to that roster bonus date, which is about March 16th. Because that would be huge news if this whole Myles Garrett thing gets resolved before the draft. That'd be amazing. It would be amazing to get resolved before free agency, which there is a chance that could happen based on what's out there. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.